Good morning, I'm Dr. David Ramaley with Seattle Natural Health, and I'm here today at the University Farmers Market here in Seattle, Washington. And I'm going to do one of my favorite things is to give a tour of this market to our patients. And what I'm going to start off by doing is giving a short talk on the benefits of grass-fed animals, organic soils, and how this can benefit our lives and give us more energy. And then after that, we're going to come here to the market and we're actually going to meet some of the farmers, and they're going to tell us about why their animals are super healthy, how they use organic soil, grasses, and it's just an amazing experience to meet these people because they work so hard. So welcome. The thing I love about coming here is we can talk about organic food and how that benefits our health, which I'll definitely cover. But the thing about it is, I think more than anything is transparency. And so that's kind of the new word, right? But if you went to any of these farmers and said, can I have a tour of your farm? Virtually every one of them would say, come on over. Whether they're plants, animals, they're making kimchi, whatever it is, they'll be totally transparent with you and they have nothing to hide. So I think that to me, that's the highest standard of how you grow or raise your animals, is when you're totally transparent with people. So that's what I love about here. And one of the things that I want to focus on today is also about grass-fed animals and how those are really important to us. And so with the grass-fed products, it means that any animal product you see here, whether it be like any dairy product and meat, it means that all of their animals are raised on grass. And that's extremely important because 98% of all the animals raised in the United States are all raised on what are called these like confined animal lots, which probably a lot of you are familiar with. But they're all fed corn and soy and antibiotics and everything else. And all the meat that you're going to see here is all raised specifically just on grass, or they might feed them alfalfa during other times. So the energy and the nutritional content of that food is so much better than what you could buy conventionally. When you feed an animal corn and soy, it's going to get the same problem that happens with humans if all we do is just eat corn and soy, and most of that corn and soy is genetically modified. So these animals are taking it in, and that's not what they should be eating. So if we're not eating the foods that we're supposed to be eating, we end up with things like heart disease, cancer, all these other things. This is a heart of a conventionally raised animal. So this is going to look like what a human heart looks like, who eats basically a bunch of crap. So if you see the heart muscle, it's there, but you see all that fat around it? So you don't want to have that fat around your heart. Some of you have done what's in our office we call a bioimpedance machine. And so on that, what we do is we actually measure visceral fat on people. And it's really interesting because visceral fat is what you don't want to have, because visceral fat creates a lot of inflammation. And they know that the more visceral fat you have, the higher risk of diabetes and cancer. They've clearly proved that. So we can actually measure that on people. But if someone were to do that test, this is what we're measuring. That white part right there is visceral fat. So one of the places we're going to go to today is called SKAGIT River Farms. I want to show you this is from beef, by the way. And I want to show you the beef farm and what this looks like. So do you see how much fat is on that? So fat is not bad. So when you eat meat, eating the fat on that is actually going to be very healthy if it's from an appropriately raised animal. So the more we can stick to grass-fed animals, that makes a huge difference. But we're going to go to a place called Seabreeze Farms today, and this is their duck fat. We've actually been out to their farm, and that's one of the things I'll go over with this particular place. We've gone out to a farm, and their ducks just sit out in grass. That's all they eat is completely grass. And so when the animal eats the grass, what it does is it takes all those, grass has actually a lot of omega-3s in it, like we think of the fish oil. So that animal eats the omega-3s and eats the grass, and it turns it into, or it takes the beta-carotene, I should say, from the grass, and then it puts it in there, and that's what forms in through here. So that's why when you see a grass-fed animal with that bright yellow, you also see it on the fat of grass-fed animals. It's not going to be as white. It's going to be a little bit darker, a little more yellow, because that's the beta-carotene that the animal is taking in. And that's why this one is white, because even though it's duck fat, all their ducks are basically fed corn and soy. So that's the difference between that fat and this one. This is actually raw butter. So that's an animal that's just been fed corn and soy. And this is the animal that was raised completely just on grass. The Union of Concerned Scientists and the Sierra Club have all endorsed this methodology of raising animals because they actually find when animals are raised on pasture that it actually acts as a carbon sequester. So, there's a lot of things about not eating meat, and that's actually true for a lot of that's raised in those confinements, because they definitely contribute to a lot of the environmental problems. But on grass, and I don't almost want to, I'll let the farmers talk it because they get so passionate, but if you talk to them, they're just not letting cows run on grass, right? I mean, it's a very scientific operation. So what they'll tell you is that cows graze on this grass, and many of them have like 16 varieties of grass. and most of the grass is actually all native. So the roots go way, way down. National Geographic did a great study on this, and even looking at some of the grass-fed animals, and they showed how the roots go way down in the ground, and that's sequestering the carbon. So then the cows basically end up by pooping all over the grass, and then what the farmers do, they take these chicken coops, they roll them over the areas where the cows were, and they eat all the parasites and the flies out of the poop. And then they start making eggs, and then after that, they let the other animals go through. So it's a whole rotational cycle. So it's cool, it doesn't require fertilizer, it doesn't require a lot of water, because the animals are actually eating grass and that hydrates them a lot. So it's this whole operation. So they'll go over that, but it's really cool. And most of the farmers who I would call them ranchers, they would never define themselves as ranchers. They're gonna say they're grass farmers. So if you go out there to their farm and talk to them, you'll see them get super passionate about their grass. The animals they like, but they're not talking about animals. And this one place called Tall Grass Bakery is great because they make a spelt bread, which I'll show you when we get there. And so spelt is a traditional grain. And so it's different than our kind of wheat, because most of the wheat that we see in the stores is not genetically modified, but it's been hybridized over and over and over to where now it contains a lot of gluten. And that's what people tend to react to a lot. So it's really common. People say I go to France or to Italy and I can eat the bread there with no problem, but when I come back to the United States, I start having problems. And again, that's twofold. One is in France and Italy and Spain, they use more traditional sourdough methods. So again, it breaks that down. It's more traditional, and also the grains they use are very different than what we'd use here. So a lot of people who have gluten problems or wheat allergies, if they eat sourdough bread, that sourdough is actually what kind of breaks down the gluten, and it actually pre-digests the proteins. This is all forage, so it's not even on a farm. This is just stuff they go out and forage. So you're picking up just some really like awesome light, lots of energy. And again, it's like it's speaking to our genetics. So I always come here and let's see what they have today. Oh, like this is something I like is stinging nettles, right? So it's really weird we're paying for stinging nettles, right? But these are really good in soups, or let's grab another one here. This is also called miner's lettuce. And again, it's like, I don't even know the nutritional content. I have no idea. I don't even care. Again, it's like I know it's grown out in through the area and they just literally forage it. So I'm looking at it more for the kind of the information and for, like I mentioned, about gene expression. This is what I bought last week, and these are called sea beans. They actually just pick them right out of the marsh. And so when you eat them, you can actually taste the iodine in it, right? So it's when you make them into a soup or you can stir fry them, they're really good. But when you taste it, it's kind of salty, almost tastes a little bit like the ocean. But you're just picking up all these like incredible minerals. And you think about a vitamin, right? When you take a vitamin, they always have to put something on it so your body can absorb it. But when you're getting it from food, this is it. I mean, this is the pure form. And so when you're eating this, the vitamins you're getting from this, your body will absorb it, and it already has the energy in it. So this is like way better than any vitamin that you can get. And this is all raw, and again, all the goats are fed on pasture. So it's, you know, they got all those omega-3s and everything else in it. They don't homogenize it, means they don't blend it together, they don't pasteurize it, so you get that whole nutritional profile in it. These are the duck eggs. So like, so I like to get duck eggs. Not everybody likes duck eggs. In my family, not a whole lot, but I like them. But you know, why a duck egg, right? So I could tell you, well, duck egg actually has more cholesterol, which I think is good. It's higher in omega-3s. It's got a little higher protein, blah, blah, blah. But what it is, it's just a different species. That's all it is. So I've known these people like for years. I think you were just a little...
I was probably, I started the markets at 4. So.
Yeah. Our whole family was raised on their meat here. So I feel so much gratitude for all that you guys do. And I know it's a ton of work. I don't know how farmers do it. But I want to let Nicole talk about your farm. You know, I mentioned a little bit like how you guys consider yourself more grass farmers and like kind of ranchers, and a little bit how your operation works. And
yeah, we started it because we wanted to grow what we could feed our family. And it grew into a business, but it started with the 3 basics of organic, sustainable, and humane. and that's what we wanted. And my dad went to schools, he went to weekend workshops about soil, not even about how to, animal husbandry. It was, how do I make this soil bioavailable, so that the grass can take what it needs, so that the animals can have the correct nutrients, so that they can feed me. So to know that your chicken is on grass, you have to be able to talk to the farmer. And if the farmer is truly free range, they're proud of it. So they want to tell you about it. So it's not a hard, it's a very easy question to ask, especially the people at this market. People at markets, they want to tell you about how they do it because they're proud of how well they take care of their animals.
One thing about oysters they're super high in what's called DHA. So when you hear about fish oil, you get called EPA and DHA you see in supplements. But oysters are particularly high in DHA, which is great. That is the one oil that you want for your brain. So we can take in a supplement, you get DHA in food, but oysters are they're packed full of DHA. And the other thing is they're full of zinc. So for the men in the audience, zinc is needed for healthy prostate, but you can't find any other food on the planet that has as much zinc as, oysters are an incredible food. This is called Stokesberry Farms, and then I've been coming here for years, buying the chicken and the eggs. One of the things they do specialize that which other farmers won't so much, is actually cut up the chicken. So if you want just legs or a breast or something they actually sell these here. But they also just sell the whole chicken, which is actually a cheaper way to do it, less expensive, and then you can cut it up from there. They're down in Olympia. And as I told you, these are the people that sell their chicken parts to the Seahawks. So I'm always emailing Janelle to say, when can I get my chicken legs and everything else? So sorry, the Seahawks have them. But they are all pasture fed, and Nicole was saying down there, they can't always raise them on grass all the time, but they do get the organic feed. They get to go out, pick at worms, little bugs, whatever they can to make it as healthy as possible. In our national anthem, it talks about the wheat isn't that way anywhere, because that's what it did. It was waves of amber grain. You would see it do it. But they figured out that was too expensive. So they hybridized it. So now wheat's a foot tall, because it's too costly to do that. So they changed that ancient wheat that was in the United States to now what we have basically everywhere. So in Europe, they haven't done that. And so that's why the people can tolerate those grains a lot better. And that's like the spelt, because spelt is an ancient grain. So it's been around for thousands of years. And so that's why it works. And the thing I just told about the sourdough is that, when they take the sourdough, I mentioned a little bit, but it's sitting there. They make their own sourdough, but it's interacting with yeast and fungi and bacteria and all sorts of stuff in the environment. And again, that environment is from Seattle, right? So you could get a sourdough from Bulgaria or sourdough from somewhere else, but each sourdough is specific to that area often, because it absorbs all those different bacteria. And that's the information, again, I think, when you do sourdough bread. Sourdough pre-digests a lot of the proteins in it, so that's why people can often handle a sourdough than they could if they were just doing a yeast kind of bread. Bone broth. This is a chicken, and they also make a beef broth. And so there's, it'll depend a little bit from each batch and how they make it. So that's why I always like it. It's always a little different. But it's very gelatinous. So if you go and buy some broth in the store, it's almost more like water. When you see their broth, it's much thicker, and that's because of how they treat their animals. So when you get in the bone, and I don't know if you know about broth, but you basically leave it, you let it kind of simmer for about 24 hours, depending on the animal. But what you're doing is you're taking all the minerals and amino acids and everything out of that bone, and it's ending up in here. And there's not really any fat in here, that's why you see it very liquidy. But it's really what gives your ligaments, your tendons, and your bones all that strength. You want to say anything about your farm?
We're all about minimal intervention, very pasture and grass-based rotational grazing methods for our animals. So we move our animals routinely from paddock to paddock is what we call a fenced-off area of pasture. And so we have our farm divided into about 20 small paddocks. We farm about 20 acres total, and then we rotate our animals, the cows, sheep, chickens, ducks, guineas, and they just kind of follow each other around the pasture, grazing behind each other and together at times. And so what that does is it keeps the grass as healthy as possible, so we have the highest nutrition available to our animals. And by rotating the animals regularly, it prevents them from overgrazing the pasture, which is easy to do if you leave your animals in one spot for too long. So that's what we focus on, and the main reason for that is the nutrition and the health of the animals that comes from being out on living green grass is really, really important. If you look at the color, particularly of our poultry, is where you really see the effect of the pasture. You'll notice that our chickens and ducks have a very yellow appearance to them, and that comes from the green growing grass.
Thanks so much for coming. It was great to have you here, and I love sharing the farm with everybody. So awesome. Have a good weekend, and I'll see you soon.
Today was such a privilege to listen to Dr. Ramaley and have him walk us through this gorgeous farmers market. I think one of the problems we have is just trying to get back to basics, and he was very knowledgeable and educating us about the process and the direct relationship between the quality of food and the process in which it's farmed or grown or developed.
I wanted to come and soak up ideas from Dr. Ramaley that I can incorporate just into my regular routine. I have 2 young kids, and I wanted to get ideas of how we could eat better in a really easy way and take advantage of the local market that we have every week.
The fascinating thing for me was learning how we're affected by the foods that we eat and understanding how the processed foods affect us and how organic and natural foods really benefit us and our bodies.
Again, food is one of the most important things that we can do for health. If you're having any kind of chronic health conditions and pain, things aren't going right in your life health-wise or energy-wise, food is where it really begins, and this is some of the best food. I'm Dr. David Ramaley. Have a great day.